Argentina is a classic example of a riches to rags socialist authoritarian transition. With vast raw resources and a formerly educated populace, Argentina was perfectly positioned to be a major player on the world stage until the socialists took over. After decades of slow decline, only the tattered bones of that greatness still remain. And with inflation, taxes, and regulation out of control, many people find working a fruitless endeavor and have essentially given up. And then Javier Milei came along. So one must ask, what would happen to not just Argentina, but the surrounding region and the world if someone with such strong libertarian ideals was able to take the helm of a nation of just under 46 million? The transition from wealthy and growing economy to socialist hellhole didn't happen overnight, and the reversal won't be instantaneous either. The scale of the effects of Javier's rule would depend on the amount of confidence he is able to instill in domestic workers and foreign investors. If he was able to push forward some constitutional revisions, better protecting private property and individual rights, and somehow assure that his successors wouldn't immediately undo his work, we could see massive amounts of investment capital pouring into the country. Of course, investment capital doesn't instantly translate into factories and infrastructure, but what it does do is provide the fuel to continue the fire that Javier has sparked domestically and internationally. Javier is a rare breed of liberal, or in the American dialect, more of a libertarian.
Yo no soy socialista, yo soy libertario. La vida sin libertad no merece ser vivida. Es decir, en algún momento me preguntaron si yo estaría dispuesto a dar mi vida por la idea de la libertad. Y yo estoy dispuesto a darla. Porque hacer lo correcto no se negocia.
Unlike in the United States and Europe, the left hasn't linguistically appropriated the term liberal, which originally meant someone who had a loose grip on society and focused on individual rights. The term liberal has the same roots as liberty. While the Republicans in America have many problems, I say without reservation that they are more liberal than the party with the actual title of liberals. In fact, one thing that Tucker Carlson noted in his interview with Javier is that he is not what we would strictly consider conservative or Republican. Instead, he is what Tucker and many conservatives would consider an extreme anti-authoritarian or libertarian. Among libertarian circles, we would be quick to point out that he isn't an extreme libertarian, which internally we point out as essentially being anarchist, but more of a mainstream libertarian or minarchist, which is what the Mises Caucus libertarians advocate. As such, Javier's mere existence as the leading presidential candidate of a large country with the potential for dramatic relevance on the international stage lends American libertarians more domestic and international credibility than they have in years, if ever. Ever since Ron Paul was rejected by the Republican Party at large, there has been a growing rift between Republicans and libertarians to the point where defining libertarians as a branch of the Republican Party is not accurate. It is unfortunate but true that in a nation controlled by a two-party system, libertarians, along with communists, greenies, and other minor parties, are left with the unappealing choice of voting with the major party that somewhat travels in their direction or being irrelevant. But while the socialists have managed to suborn the Democrat Party to their will, the libertarians have failed to do so with the Republicans. I think this is because the individualism of libertarians does not lend itself to the political intrigue and maneuvering it takes to infect and take over a larger party from the inside. This means what Javier has accomplished is all the more amazing. Things are so bad in Argentina, yet the people still have access to information on economics and freedom, creating the perfect cocktail to wake up the younger generation. The hardship Argentinians felt is what led the younger generation down a path of salvation, the exact opposite of what is happening in America. It probably warrants detailed analysis to understand how the youth of Argentina were able to learn Austrian economics, natural rights, and the principles of freedom, all while their state institutions, media, and education system were controlled by the leftists and government. One thing to keep in mind is that it is the younger generations, not the entrenched power structure, that support Javier. So it is possible that he could meet fierce, even violent resistance from the old guard should he win. This also means that Javier's local support would be less immediately able to take advantage of the free economy. While it is obvious that they would make gig work and cross-border electronic labor easier by removing regulations, fees, and taxes, it is hard to know how many of the younger Argentines would be able to translate this additional work opportunity into businesses of their own. The first thing that would be required for an economic turnaround would be a correction to the rampant and out-of-control inflation. This could be as simple as turning off the printing machines and immediately deregulating. But just as with every inflation situation, not making things worse doesn't mean you are making it better. Unfortunately, the Argentine peso has been trashed and may be unsalvageable. It is possible they could issue a new currency, but using that to replace existing currency would be as problematic as it would essentially be the same as Zimbabwe cutting zeros off their currency. It does not improve its buying power or the buying power of its citizens overall. And that is what the whole problem with inflation is. Not the numerical value you put on the face of your own currency, but the buying power of your citizens, both domestically and internationally. It is likely that Javier could take multiple actions at once to provide immediate relief. He can make the USD and Bitcoin legal currency. While effective in providing a means for the population of a nation to begin earning a stable living in a storeholder of value that won't immediately dissolve, it requires a great amount of national humility to implement. Many countries who have destroyed the sovereignty of their own currency make the problem worse by refusing to accept that they no longer have control over their own currency.
¿Y cuál es su propuesta?
Mi propuesta, básicamente lo que hay que hacer es una reforma del Estado. Esto lo estamos publicando el mes que viene con Diego Giacomini. Básicamente consta en bajar 15 puntos el gasto público, para bajar 10 puntos la presión fiscal, quitar presión sobre la oferta de la economía para que la economía vuelva a crecer, y en el plano monetario, para eliminar la inflación directamente, hacer volar el Banco Central.
Gasto público es una categoría grande. ¿De dónde sacás puntualmente?
Perdón,
Bien.
pero hacer volar el Banco Central, ¿qué significa?
Eliminarlo. Eliminarlo.
¿Existe algún país desarrollado que no tenga Banco Central?
La pregunta es, a ver, ¿cómo fue la historia del Banco Central en Argentina? Argentina tiene Banco Central desde 1935. O sea, antes no tenía. Sí. Tenía caja de comercio.
Argentino roca, ¿no?
Digo, con lo cual no había Banco Central acá, sí. ¿Ok? ¿Cuánto era la inflación? 3%. Después tuvimos Banco Central mixto.
Sí, bueno, en 1935 no existía el control remoto, ¿no?
Bueno, está bien, pero...
No existía la televisión.
Pero a ver, digamos, el dinero es un invento privado. Cuando el dinero pasó a las manos de los políticos, se convirtió en un mecanismo de estafa. A ver, Argentina no es gratis tener un banco central. Vos cada vez que la tasa de inflación supera el 20%, perdés un...
¿No quiere que se emita más moneda, papel moneda?
Exactamente. No, y no quiero que haya más moneda local, porque es la moneda del político argentino. Por ende, no puede valer ni excremento, porque los políticos argentinos no sirven ni para bono. A ver, para que se tenga en claro, si no fuera por la presencia del Banco Central, Argentina tendría un PBI per cápita como el de Estados Unidos.
The impediment stopping countries from adopting a foreign or alternative currency is pride. Leaders do not want to admit that they don't have control over their currency. But functionally, a leader and a nation have no more control over a currency when it is experiencing hyperinflation than when it is a foreign currency. In fact, I would say you have less control when you are experiencing hyperinflation, because if you start using dollars, you can always slowly implement a new currency with a new system that has a greater chance to work at a later date. That option is more of a fantasy if you are experiencing hyperinflation. You must build trust in your economy before you can build trust in your currency. Because while there is hard math involved in inflation numbers, in that it is the amount of dollars in an economy chasing the amount of economic activity in that economy minus the number of dollars sucked up by foreign holdings and exchange, the economic activity is greatly controlled by both foreign and domestic trust in both your economy and your government. This isn't trust that the government is powerful, but trust that the government will respect its own laws and respect the essential legal components of economic activity, such as property rights. Assuming Argentina succeeds on these two major issues, both establishing trust in the strength and longevity of property rights and appropriately addressing inflation, we could see trillions of dollars of investment pour into the country. Despite the current economic situation in Argentina, the country is filled with natural and human resources. The easiest and fastest new industries to implement would be resource extraction and manufacturing. It doesn't take long to set up mines, but it does take some time to build new factories, but not as long as you might think. A warehouse for a factory only takes a few months to build, and with modern shipping systems and the slowing of trade with China, there are large amounts of excess ships that could bring construction capital and experts to the country virtually overnight. In fact, Argentina is in an ideal situation to establish itself as a global economic power over the next decade. The US, Europe, Russia, and China are all experiencing demographic issues with aging populations and brutal stagnation in growth. It has been shown that birth rates depend on multiple factors ranging from standards of living, infant survival, and hope/economic activity. While people seem to be willing to reproduce with reckless abandon in third world regions like the Middle East and Africa, first world countries, or countries that used to be first world like Argentina, have been shown to be far more guided by a sense of hope and affluence. If you feel you can afford to have kids and that those kids will have economic opportunities of their own, you are far more likely to have kids. Look at America. We had an excellent birth rate when the boomers were in charge. It slowed as Gen X took over reproducing, and they smelt something off in the economic winds, and has essentially ground to a halt with millennials and zoomers who have become responsible for reproduction because those generations see absolutely zero economic future for themselves or their kids. Why would you have children if you are struggling to pay rent and feed yourself? You consider yourself well-educated and rational, even though nobody truly is rational, and you articulate to yourself and your partner that having kids might actually be cruel, as you can't provide an upbringing for them anywhere close to the upbringing that you were given, and you aren't happy with how you yourself turned out, so how could someone you produce possibly be happy or have a good life? It is a vicious circle that squashes the reproduction rate, and why depressed, economically declining first world countries have such abysmal growth rates. This isn't something that socialist or pseudo-socialist leftist policies can fix. Handouts and government programs only incentivize irresponsible reproduction in broken homes rather than economic growth and the replacement of intelligent, motivated workers. Keep in mind that many women in the US purposefully have multiple children out of wedlock because they can get more in government assistance and child support payments from multiple men than if they had married any one of those men and had kids just with him. A two-parent household is the greatest determiner of potential success. It is not nice to hear, but the data is irrefutable. If you are brought up in a single-parent home, especially when that single parent is a mother, not a father, you are more likely to end up in jail, addicted to drugs, or languish in poverty for your whole life. Yet this is the exact reproductive behavior we encourage to the exclusion of all else. You must tax to support those programs, taxes that come from hardworking people and hurt the economy. And economic strength and potential is the greatest factor in determining first world reproduction rates. While a strong functioning economy is best for reproduction rates, hope for the future is second best. That sense of hope is why you often see post-war population booms in various countries. It is likely that after a short while we would see large-scale repatriation of young people to Argentina, along with foreign investment. That would be followed by a baby boom in Argentina, which would put a high demand on medical professionals. Growing populations are fantastic for economies. People spend, they work hard, they have purpose and drive to provide for their children. Combine that with actual economic opportunities and foreign investments and some amazing farmland and natural resources, and Argentina could quickly become one of the fastest growing economies in the world. Keep in mind, All of this is happening as manufacturers are fleeing China like rats off a sinking ship. China has become a hostile business environment, and I'm not just talking about the government and regulations. The population has been indoctrinated by their government, telling them day in and day out that they are superior to all other peoples, and it is their destiny to rule the world. Combine this with the long-term disastrous effects of the one-child policy, creating little princes with little to no work ethic and a huge chip on their shoulder, and China has quickly become an unprofitable and outright dangerous place to manufacture. Even Foxconn, Apple's manufacturer, has been building new facilities in other countries instead of China. I personally believe that this exodus caused by China is one of the main drivers of China's belligerent foreign policy of late. The government sees the manufacturing backbone of their economy packing up and leave, and they are panicking. The CCP built its legitimacy on a growing economy and standard of living, and now that the trend is reversed, they are looking for external enemies and resources to keep their people unified and backing them. This pattern has been repeated historically. Whenever Chinese leaders fear losing power, they accuse another nation of foreign aggression and either go to war or rattle the saber hard enough to rally the people behind them in a classic us versus them ethno-tribal response. This means if Javier wins and China loses influence in Argentina, the CCP will be straight up enraged. They believe they have a right to rule and would not be happy with losing influence over Argentina. So Argentina would have two choices: look for another partner for trade and defense, or do it themselves. Doing it themselves is something they could only accomplish after rebuilding their economy, so in all likelihood, they would seek closer ties with the United States. As far as we have fallen on the freedom and economic scales, we are still one of the most free countries in the world. Yes, I know various indexes place the US lower than places like New Zealand, but those are not scales created by people who understand freedom.
Nosotros no somos más que nuestros representados. En términos financieros es el derivado, el activo derivado, nunca vale más que el subyacente. El derivado existe porque existe el subyacente. Nosotros, existimos como representantes del pueblo porque existe el pueblo. Y es una locura, es un delirio arrogarse que un representante del pueblo es más que el propio pueblo. Es un delirio, es el delirio en el que vive la casta política. Entonces, en nuestro gobierno, los políticos van a tener que vivir la misma vida que vive el ciudadano común. Van a tener que internalizar el resultado. Y si se mandan macanas, no solo van a sufrir los argentinos de bien, van a sufrir más los políticos. Van a tener que vivir como viven los argentinos de bien. Se les acabó los privilegios, se acabó la joda. Y esto solamente lo puede hacer un outsider, lo puede hacer un tipo que viene de afuera, y no cualquier tipo de outsider, porque está llena la historia de outsider que se meten en estructuras preexistentes. Nosotros somos outsider, porque somos outsider sin estructura precedente, que la construimos para esto. ¿Para qué? Para sacarlos a patadas en el culo. Se acabó la joda, se acabaron los privilegios de la política, se acabó. Una Argentina distinta es imposible con los mismos de siempre. Basta de la joda. Se les terminó la joda. Y por eso me quieren exterminar. Por eso me mandan a los 200 fracasados. ¿Sí? Por eso me mandan a los pseudos intelectuales. Por eso me mandan a los curavilleros. Por eso me mandan, a atacar por los medios. Por eso me atacan los empresarios prebendarios. Porque se acabó la joda. ¿Por qué recrudece el ataque? Porque creían que esto no iba a pasar y se encontraron con un tercio de la población gritando libertad. Gritan libertad. Descubrieron que no quieren ser corderos. Descubrieron que se sienten mejor siendo leones. Porque como dije en mi primer discurso, yo no vine acá a guiar corderos, vine a despertar leones y están despertando. Están despertando y se van a comer crudo a los políticos chorros. Se van a comer crudo a los empresarios prebendarios, se van a comer crudo a los sindicalistas que entregan a la gente, se van a comer crudo a los medios de comunicación que fueron funcionales a todos estos chorros para mantener este curro, y se van a llevar puesto a los econochantas, a los encuestoros y a toda esa basura, ¿sí? Que abogan por la religión del Estado porque curran de ahí. Eso, es decir, Argentina está despertando. Hay luz, sí hay luz, porque la gente está despertando. Descubrió que la esclavitud no es negocio. Y hay una vida mejor que es la vida en libertad.
Would you trust a scale created and curated by a socialist? Would you trust the North Korean Index for Economic Freedom? No, because that sort of data relies entirely on who is gathering, sorting, and determining exactly what is free. Remember, socialists think a freedom from want exists, along with rights to housing, food, and medical care and more. I've discussed the nature of freedom in other videos, so I'll be brief. You do not have a right to anything that requires the labor or property of someone else. You have a right to pursue and secure those things on your own, but no right can infringe on the rights of others, and everyone has a right to control their own labor and property. While I do think the US has become a tyrannical dystopian hell as more and more socialist policies are grafted into a system that is supposed to be capitalist, creating a Frankenstein of contradictory systems that cannot succeed, it is still better than any other country out there because their Frankensteins are even more tyrannical and have more socialist parts than ours. The situation mirrors what I discuss in one of my first videos, Release Valve Theory, where I discuss how tyrannical governments can only squeeze so hard when there is somewhere more free for their people to escape to. But what we are seeing is a world where there are fewer and fewer free places to flee to, and so governments can squeeze harder and harder. Eventually, when there is nowhere free to escape to, governments will be able to shut their fists with an absolute finality, implementing full and brutal authoritarian control. And as the US becomes more authoritarian, we see other countries do exactly what I predict in that video and squeeze tighter. The last beacon of freedom has been slowly snuffing itself out in America. I hope you follow where I'm going with this. Because if Argentina does walk the path of freedom and becomes a libertarian state, it could become the sole beacon of true freedom left in the world. And a beacon like that can only break the release valve and allow people to leave their own tyrannical hellholes for a brighter future. If Argentina becomes libertarian, it could single-handedly hold back the darkness of global tyranny, making it far harder for tyrants to implement their New World Order agendas by giving people somewhere to escape to. It is entirely possible that Argentina won't just save itself by turning from socialism to libertarianism, but give freedom one last chance to hold back the darkness. The world must have a place that is truly free to keep the prison of tyranny from slamming completely shut everywhere else. If this happens and the United States continues on its doomed path and Argentina becomes free, you will see every country look at their growth and economic power with envy and hate. But by standing strong, they would give the free people in those countries the time and resources to fight back and push for libertarian reform in their own countries. People, even when educated poorly, are not truly stupid. NPCs can be woken up if given enough exposure to the truth. Argentina has the chance to become that truth, to become something greater, to become what the United States was during its infancy, and what made it the most powerful nation on earth for over 100 years. The rise of the Pax Americana came from an age where the principles of freedom were first being truly examined and understood from a universal and individual standpoint, so it was still clouded by the legacy of monarchy and empire. By examining where the United States got it both right and wrong, Argentina has an opportunity to take all the good without most of the bad. I don't think it's possible to be a beacon of freedom without breaking some eggs, because the envy of other nations will create avarice and war. But if the free people of the United States join together with this new generation of libertarians in Argentina, we have the opportunity to usher in a new golden age of freedom. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe.